Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Iconic Sonics. I'm Mike Gastineau, and Iconic Sonics, the show dedicated to the Sonics and their great fans. Our show today features a guy who had two very memorable seasons in Seattle in the early and mid 90s. When Kendall Gill arrived, there were high hopes. It didn't all work out, but Kendall Gill helped this team win a lot of games and, again, spent two memorable seasons here in Seattle. He'll spend a memorable time visiting today with our correspondent and guest host, Chris Daniels. Here's Kendall Gill and Chris Daniels. Guys, take it away.
All right, guys, we are here now with Kendall Gill, a guy who I remember fondly from the mid-'90s as I sit here and look out at Seattle Center and what used to be Seattle Center Coliseum, then Key Arena, now Climate Pledge. I mean, this resume, Kendall, that you have is far better than mine. NBA rookie all first team, NBA steals leader in 1999, most steals in one game with 11 steals in a game, yes, and scored 12,914 points in the NBA, otherwise known as 12,914 more points than me. And of course, with the Supersonics back in the mid-'90s. Kendall, thank you for joining us here on Iconic Sonics. How are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate you guys reaching out to me. Seattle, I tell people that Seattle has I'm a little bit partial to Chicago because I'm from Chicago,
Yeah.
But Seattle, in my opinion, has the second best fans in the league, or they used to. I mean, I'm sure they still have great fans with the Seahawks and with the Mariners and everything, but my experience there with the Sonics, the fans were second to none, really. I mean, they were so loud, so into the game. They knew the game of basketball. It's just a shame that there's no NBA team there now.
We'll get to that, but I wanted to start even way back before the Sonics.
Mm-hmm.
I remember you just said Chicago. You were on those great Fighting Illini teams.
Mm-hmm.
That part of a great team in '89 with Nick Anderson and Marcus Liberty and Kenny Battle. Final Four team that actually played in Seattle. Was that at the old Kingdom? Was that your first visit?
That was my first visit to Seattle. Yeah, and we actually stayed at we did not stay in Seattle. We stayed at the Red Roof Inn in Bellevue. Believe it or not. I don't know if that place is still there or not, but that's where we stayed. And, that was my first time visiting Seattle, beautiful city and everything. But, unfortunately, we didn't win the national title at that time. I felt that we were the best team in college basketball, but I believe that we overlooked Michigan at the time that we were there. We were looking towards saying that we were going to play Duke in the finals. At least I was, because we had beaten Michigan twice, and it seemed like that if everything worked out the way according to plan, it would be Illinois versus Duke in the finals. Unfortunately, it was Seton Hall in Michigan.
And I think a lot of people remember that game, but we'll move on. I mean, that was. I think you've probably had better experiences than the Red Roof in Bellevue. No offense to the Red Roof Inn. But that really was that great team that introduced you to a lot of people in the NBA. 5th overall pick in Charlotte. How would you think your career started there in Charlotte? You played with a guy that I think people who don't know the NBA now follow on Twitter a lot, Rex Chapman.
Yeah, actually, I just got off of a podcast with Rex just a few minutes ago. So I did his, and now I'm doing yours. But yeah, I was drafted 5th by the Charlotte Hornets, and at first I didn't understand why they drafted me because they had Rex already. They had Dale Curry. I didn't understand why they needed another 2-guard. So, but they drafted me, and then it worked out. They said, we're going to take the best player available, and that's what I was told, at least. And we'll say, and once you come here, Kendall, it will all work itself out. And it did, but I'm still friends to this day with Rex, really good friends with him, really good friends with Dale Curry, Muggsy Bogues, and all those guys.
And you had a great first year, all rookie NBA team, NBA rookie, all first team.
Yeah, I mean, it turned out, really well for me because I was apprehensive at first, like I said, because I did not want to compete for a position with my friend Rex. Rex and I have been friends since high school. Didn't know Dale, but I didn't want to compete, with Dale either. But it turned out that it worked for the best. I was moved to the point guard position for a little bit. It allowed me to learn the game from that position. And then when I was able to move to the 2-guard position, opposite Muggsy Bogues the next year, things really took off for me.
And then a couple of years go by, and there's that 1993 trade to the Sonics. I hate to say it for both you and I, but 30 years ago now, 1990.
Yeah, 30 years ago, yeah.
And I remember the trade at the time. I almost thought it was a fleecing for the Sonics, right? Bob Whitsitt even said publicly, made a comment that the Sonics were giving up a couple of role players for you, for a star, for a defensive guy, a slasher. What do you remember about how that trade went down, and your feelings at the time with Charlotte and your feelings at the time with Seattle?
Well, listen, I have to be honest with you. Back then I was a young kid. I was enamored with playing in a big city, which is part of the reason why I left Charlotte. If I had to do it all over again, I probably would not have left Charlotte. I was playing with Larry Johnson, Alonzo Mourning, Muggsy Bogues, Dale Curry. We had just taken the Knicks to 5 games in the playoffs when I left. And I didn't understand that a rising tide lifts all boats. Okay, this is the young Kendall Gill. Okay, and I left there, and I didn't understand what I was leaving. But fortunately for me, I was still going into a great situation with the Sonics because they had a powerhouse, a juggernaut, waiting to win an NBA championship. And with Sean Kemp, Gary Payton, Ricky Pierce, Sam Perkins, Vincent Askew, Michael Cage, and all those guys. I didn't know those guys when I first came over, but I quickly learned to like them, and I quickly learned that this team my first year was probably the best team in the NBA at that point. And so once the move was made, I adjusted and I embraced the Sonics, the Northwest culture, and I really had a great time. My first year there, I really did. And it's unfortunately that and we may talk about this later, but I mean it's unfortunate that we weren't able to win a championship with that team because I felt that was a team ready made to win a championship.
Yeah, you're talking about the year, of course, 63 and 19, that 1994 team.
Yes.
That was a team that had 6 guys averaging double figures, but no 20-point scorer. Do you think that kind of team exists in today's modern NBA?
No way.
That was the definition of a team.
Yeah, that was the definition of a team because, you look back and most of the players played only about 31, 32 minutes a game. Okay, that was done by design to rest players and to keep players fresh. You didn't really see any guys playing 36, 38 minutes a game. And that's something that I had to adjust to because when I was with Charlotte, coming from Charlotte, I was playing 38 minutes a game. So that's something that I had to get used to. But I mean, it turned out that it was a good strategy because, we would blow teams out. We would sit down in the fourth quarter. We would be fresh a lot of the times. I really like the format that the coaching staff had put together the first year and everything. So, I was pleasantly surprised when I got there.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of Sonics fans want to revisit what happened at the There's still an image that I think of Dikembe Mutombo burned into everybody's mind. But
holding the basketball, yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that season in particular? I mean, that was the season that it seemed like everything was coming together.
It did, and we won 63 games, and it got to the point where the coaching staff put together a goal sheet for every game. If we held the team under 85 points, day off. If we scored 121 points, day off. So that's a big reason why we played so hard all the time during that year, is because we love having days off, you know, and if we could get the job done, then, you know, we get a free day off. And, you know, it was fun playing with Gary, playing with Sean Kemp, of course, who's one of the best players I've ever played with, both he and Gary. Seeing the excitement in the stadium at all times, you know, sold out every game, how loud the fans were. And we were always on national TV that year. People truly expected us to win that NBA title that year. They really did.
Well, and that was a season too. I mean, people have written books about this, but in the mid 90s in Seattle, you know, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden were just rocking. The Sonics were intertwined with that, the energy in the city. I think, you know, you look back in time, and that was a special moment for people, despite what happened in the playoffs. What do you remember about Seattle and your time here, besides the Red Roof Inn in Bellevue?
Well, a really, really cool place. At first, I felt kind of out of place because, you know, I'm from Chicago. I still live here, played in Charlotte, but Seattle seems so far away for me, you know, and it was so different. You know, I was not used to seeing mountains, and I was not used to seeing, you know, people that listen to Pearl Jam and things like that. And I wasn't used to going across. I believe that was the I-90 bridge, or 520 or 580.
You got them both, the I-90 and the 520, yeah.
Okay, the 520. You know, I was not used to going across bodies of water like that, looking in the background and how beautiful it was and everything. I'm like a concrete jungle guy. You know, I'm not used to seeing all this natural beauty. So, and that's one of the things that I tell people that have never been to Seattle. I said, listen, man, if that city were on the East Coast, everybody would live there, you know, because it is one of the most beautiful cities in the world, you know. And being young, I think I was 23, 24 years old, and I really couldn't appreciate where I was living and what, you know, how to take it all in. If I had to do it all over again, you know, you're talking to a grown man now. I was a kid then. I mean, but if I had to do it all over again, man, Seattle was, I mean, I would totally embrace the culture and the city and all it had to offer back then. You know, when I was a kid, I was just playing basketball, coming in and out, and you know, going to the stadium, going to practice, and that's it. I wouldn't explore the city or, you know, go out that much. But I tell you, if I had to do it all over again, I tell you what, that's exactly what I would do. I would really get into what the city had to offer.
Well, and a lot of time has passed, and I want to delve into that with you. In terms of Coach Karl, you just talked about the teams, and I know there was a lot written at the time about the coach and your relationship with the coach. Now that time has passed, how would you, when you look back at this, how would you explain that relationship? Have you had a chance to talk to Coach Karl since?
No, you know, I still don't have a good relationship with George. You know, when I was with years after, you know, our time together, you know, George and I spoke. We shook hands, and, you know, I apologized for my part in what had happened back in my second season in Seattle. And I thought that the hatchet had been buried, but, you know, then he wrote a book and said that I was, you know, a bad teammate and things like this, which, you know, he was the guy that told me that, Kendall, you're too unselfish to be a superstar. So, you know, I don't understand. So help me understand, how am I too unselfish to be a superstar, but I'm a bad teammate? You know, so the feeling of that I have towards George is not the same, but, you know, it is what it was when I was 24 years old. But, you know, I can just say we still wouldn't sit down and have lunch together.
Well, you know, there was a lot written 30 years ago, and really in hindsight, it hasn't aged well. about your time with the Sonics. You were among the first athletes that I know to openly talk about mental health and the importance of it. It was rare for an athlete to do what you did at the time. People didn't really understand, and you're around this sport now. We've seen professional basketball players like Kevin Love in particular talk about the importance of mental health. How do you think those conversations have changed over time?
The conversations have become much more acceptable because other players, since I believe that was in '93 or '94 that happened with me, that so many more players have come out and talked about mental health, talked about the importance of it, and letting other people know that just because we dribble a basketball, athletes make tons of money, and that it still isn't all sunshine and rainbows. You do at times have things that you have to deal with in life, just like a regular person. In my situation in Seattle, and I've never told the story before, I ever even talked about it. It's part of the reason why, I was open to doing your podcast here, is I used to suffer from cluster headaches. Okay. I suffered from cluster headaches from the time I was 10 years old to up until my last year in the NBA. Okay. What I used to go through is it would be seasonal. So I would go through an episode in the fall, an episode in the winter, an episode in the spring, maybe an episode in the summer. But during the episodes, I would have 6 to 7 headaches a day. These headaches are unbearable, like migraines. Okay. At that time, when I did have to take the break, I remember because my first year I lived in Bellevue, and then after my first year I moved to downtown Seattle to an apartment. So I was at my apartment, and I used to take this shot called Imitrex. And what Imitrex is it's a shot that you put in your arm to stop the headache right away. Okay. You're only supposed to take 2 a day. My episodes were so bad, I was taking 6 to 7 of those shots every day to try to make it go away. Okay. The headaches would not stop. They were even worse when I went to sleep and woke up. So during a 3-day span, I did not go to sleep because the headache persisted for 3 days. I was tired of shooting myself in the arm with the shot because it wasn't working anymore. And I was totally exhausted. I remember going to a game, and we were playing in Tacoma back then. This was at the Tacoma Dome. I remember driving to the game, almost falling asleep in the car because I hadn't slept in 3 days. So I eventually called the NBA Players Association and told them what a problem I was having. And they told me, look, you need to take a break right now. And, I still didn't think it was depression or anything like that. I just thought that I was going through one of my cluster headache episodes. But and I still rejected that I was depressed for a long time. That's part of us as men. We're not supposed to be depressed. We're supposed to be strong enough to take anything on. That's what frame of mind I was in. Okay. So I wouldn't accept the depression part of it. Years later, I did. But because, insomnia can be a byproduct of depression, And so the NBA actually had the NBA's head of the medical staff happened to be in Seattle at that time. So he asked me to come and meet with him. I went and met with him, and he said, listen, I'm recommending right now that you stop playing for a while, at least until we can get these headaches under control and until you can get some rest. If you continue on, this is going to be dangerous for you. So that's when we announced it. And that's the true story. That's what happened. And, I was able to get some rest. And I think I came back maybe a week and a half later. Headaches were still there, but I was able to sleep. And that's what enabled me to come back and play.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that, Kendall. Do you think that really anybody around you at the time had any idea of what you were going through?
No, the trainer did. He knew that I was going through the episodes with the headaches, but nobody else did. And it was tough. I'll tell you, I've been suffering from that for my whole life, ever since I was 10 years old. But in that particular time in Seattle, it was the worst. And it got to a point where my head was hurting so bad that I wanted to just jump off the balcony, to end the pain that I couldn't get rid of, especially after using all of the Imitrex shots and things like that, and they wouldn't work anymore. So.
How much did you pay attention to what people were writing at the time? Because it was like, well, Kendall Gill has disappeared from the team for one reason or another, and you're still you're fighting this on your own battle.
Well, thank God I've got parents. My parents are still living, still here now. They still guide me even to this day. I'm 54 years old now, but I didn't pay. My mom and dad came back because I came home to Chicago for a couple of days to get rest and see some doctors and everything about my head and everything. Once we took care of that, my parents flew back to Seattle with me. They would not let me read any newspapers. They would not let me, really watch the news or anything. They stayed with me, and that's how I got through it. I assume that all of the reports were not good, but. I was willing to take the heat because I had to take care of myself, and I did that, and I'm glad that I did, because had I not taken that step, who knows what would have happened.
How are you doing with it today? I mean, are you able to manage it? Has it have the?
Oh, I don't have them anymore.
Yeah.
So what happened is that we finally found a protocol that broke the cycle of the headaches. And I've been doing that protocol ever since. Do I get one every once in a while? I may get one, as opposed to hundreds of headaches a year. I probably get one or two now a year. So thank God for science and technology that I don't have to suffer like I did throughout my career.
Have you reached out to other athletes who may have experienced the same thing? I mean, we're talking about the idea of people openly talking about this and the connection with mental health. What you're saying is it affected your physical health too. I mean, have you had a chance to talk to other athletes and try and help them find the light?
I've talked to a couple that reached out to me, about the situation that I went through, and I told them that, listen, you got to take care of yourself first. You can't listen to everybody else. There's a lot of pressures on you as a professional athlete. To perform, one, because you're getting paid a lot of money. You have that pressure. You have the pressure of the fans to perform. You have the pressure of the coach to perform as well, because the coach has to keep his job as well. And you can't worry about those pressures when it comes to your life. And, that's what I did. A lot of people would ask me, well, Kendall, he would walk around and, sometimes he would not want to be engaged in team activities or with his teammates and everything. The reason why is because my head was pounding so hard. I just wanted it to stop, and I wasn't always like that, but during the seasons in which I would have these headaches, that's the way I would be. I would be withdrawn because I could not focus, or I could not talk to anybody else because I was going through so much pain, and I didn't want to tell anybody because, like I said, going back to being a strong, capable athlete, you don't want to admit any weakness at all. And that's the phase that I was in at that time. I didn't want to I just wanted to deal with it by myself.
So it sounds like you felt too that you were misunderstood.
I knew I was misunderstood because they didn't know what I was going through at the time. Had they felt, look, I wouldn't wish cluster headaches on my worst enemy, because the pain is just unbearable. And I didn't, because it happened to me so much I didn't want my teammates or anybody else to think, oh, well, this kid is weak. He's always sick. Something's wrong with him. So I decided to just deal with it myself until I couldn't deal with it anymore.
Do you feel like, I mean, you ended up getting traded back to Charlotte.
Yeah.
Do you think that helped change the situation? I mean, you said the headaches were worst in Seattle. After you got traded back to Charlotte, did the situation improve? Did the climate around you improve?
No, they didn't improve anymore. But it never got to the point where it did in Seattle when I couldn't sleep for 3 days in a row. It never got to that point anymore. I was able to manage it a lot better. They did not go completely away until I was in my 13th year, and then they went. I can tell you, I can be honest with you, I played half of my career with the migraine. So, but I was able to deal with it because I was able to manage it because I had dealt with it for years and years and years.
Well, and you had a 15-year career. You eventually, like I said, got traded back to Charlotte from Seattle. Mm-hmm. And you, in April of 1999, April 3rd, 11 steals in a game, NBA steals leader that season. To this day, with so many three-pointers and the way the game has changed, you don't hear as much about steals anymore.
Right.
What was it about stealing the ball that was so important to your game, and you were able to focus on that, especially there in the late 90s, early 2000s?
Yeah. Well, when Nate, Gary, and I were on the Sonics, we used to steal the basketball all the time. I mean, I've had a knack for stealing the basketball my whole basketball career, even when I was in high school. I still had a record at my high school for like 13 steals in one game. But that day, and I can tell you, Clyde Frazier told me this. He said, Kendall, he knew I was a ball hawk, so he gave me advice. He saw me going after steals at the beginning of the game all the time because, playing in New Jersey for 6 years and him being a commentator for the Knicks, he got a chance to watch me play a lot. So he said, don't go for the first 3 steals of the game. The reason why is because when, say, for instance, you're in a close game, that player is going to throw that same pass into a lane and you'll be able to steal it, and that can make the difference in the game. He said, but if you close up the lane now, they'll never be able to throw it. If you go for it now, they won't throw it later on in the game. So actually, in that game against Miami, I let the first 3 go by me, because I didn't want to steal it. But then I just picked it up. They just kept throwing it. I'm like, okay, you guys want to keep throwing, I'm going to steal it. I ended up with 13. I could have really had 14, but I let the first 3 go by.
Yeah, I mean, the game has certainly changed, right? You just said it. You and Nate and GP were all known for steals. Nate led the league 1 year. You hear more about the 3-point. I mean, you just look at the 3-point numbers and the 3-pointers attempted in today's game. How do you think this game has changed over the course of 30 years?
It's a lot easier. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, here come the old heads and things like that." But I was watching Adrian Wojnarowski on the ESPN a couple of weeks ago, and he said that, he was talking about the record explosion in scoring in the NBA, because I think Luka had 60, Donovan Mitchell had 71, Giannis had 50 something. Well, the game has been engineered on purpose to promote scoring. They took out the hand checking rules. There's a no take foul. They allow you to travel with the basketball now. They allow you to carry the basketball now. I mean, if you take all the advantages away from the defensive man, that's what's going to happen. Guys are going to score 60 and 70 something points. It's not that the players, and I get into arguments with my friends here in Chicago all the time. There's always, hey, the players are better now than they were. No, they're not. We would have adapted the same way that these players have adapted to the rules. We would, if the game back then called for us to take 3-point shots, we would have practiced it a lot more, and we would have made 3-point shots they're making now. With the defense that's being played now, that's why you can see 7-foot guys handle the basketball out on the perimeter and get all the way to the basket with their Euro steps and everything. Reason why is because there's no, they have no physicality of the game. There's no hand checking anymore. There's no, if you give a hard foul, it's a flagrant 2, you get kicked out of the game. You know, so it's just a much easier game to play than it used to be. And
it's got to be wild for you too to watch the game with the likes of Steph Curry just launching it at all places, all time. When you played with his dad, right?
Yeah, and his dad was a great shooter, but his dad never just dribbled 1 foot across the court and launched it. You know, he always got just beyond the 3-point line and knocked it down. And you know, I've been doing the Chicago Bulls games here as a studio analyst now for 16 years. So I've seen the game change from the time I was in it to the time I started doing my analysis to now. And, you know, the 3-point shots that these guys take now, we would have been taken out of the game and sat on the bench for a while if we ever did that, you know. And, you know, I know analytics have come into play for the NBA game, but, you know, a lot of these shots I don't agree with. You know, these guys are shooting, I think they average 31 3-point shots a game in today's era, when back in the 90s, we averaged 7 3-point shots a game. You know, so it's really taken a hold. And I think that, you know, sometimes it sends the wrong messages to kids too, but I have 2 kids here in Chicago. One of them's a pretty good basketball player. He may have a chance if he keeps working hard. But, you know, when I go to the AAU games or the high school games, these kids are chucking up shots and they're horrible shots, you know? And I'm like, where's the game gone, you know?
Well, yeah, you just mentioned it. Catch folks up on all the stuff you're doing in Chicago. Not only the Bulls telecast. I saw that you got deep into boxing. You're still like a big fan of the sport. You're doing some boxing at a time. Big into fitness.
Yeah.
Seems like you got a lot going on.
Yeah, I do. I have. I'm big into boxing. Actually, after I retired from basketball, I went and had 4 pro fights. I had studied jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai boxing 6 years before I retired, so I was into combat sports. And I used to box when I was a kid, but you know, when my mom and dad moved us from the city to the suburbs, there was no more boxing gym. I had to play other things. So I went and realized my childhood dream of becoming a professional boxer. I had 4 fights, and you know, I still train, you know, hard to this day. I also have a fitness club called the 60/40 Club, in which I started during the pandemic. I started it by accident. You know, I asked a friend of mine to come out and run with me. And, you know, we started putting our workouts on social media, and it grew from 2 people to 270 people a day coming to 1 football field doing this program that I do. So, and also, you know, like you mentioned, you know, I've been doing the Bulls games here now for 16 years. It's allowed me to stay in touch with the game, you know, and you know, I'm really grateful for the Bulls organization and NBC Sports Chicago for allowing me to do what I love to do, you know. And I work, but I'm retired, so you know, it's a good mix.
And you've been constantly around the league. And so let's talk, because you do have some great perspective. Talk about a couple of markets, and we'll talk about Seattle in a second. But first, Charlotte, you know, with the tie to Chicago, meaning Michael Jordan, you know, that's a franchise you've been involved with. You've seen it since Michael Jordan has taken over, but that's a franchise that never has really seemed to get elevated to another level there. What do you think's missing in Charlotte?
Well, the one thing Charlotte has to do, and it's the same thing as when I played there, is that you have to build through the draft. You're not going to get a major free agent in Charlotte because it's a small market team. It's not looked at as the glamour market. Most guys that are A-list free agents are looking at big markets. This is LA, Chicago, New York, Miami, places like that. Maybe a Phoenix. So what you have to do is you have to build through the draft. You have to draft a guy like LaMelo Ball, which they've done. You have to keep his talent in Charlotte, much like they did with myself Larry Johnson, and Alonzo Mourning. They built that team through the draft. That was 3 consecutive years that they drafted us. And you have to have the ability to retain their services because you know that other larger market teams are going to come after those guys when their time is up as a free agent, or when their time has come as a free agent. And that's exactly what happened. With myself, I was first to go to Seattle, and then Alonzo Mourning, when I was traded back to the Charlotte Hornets, Alonzo Mourning was poached by the Miami Heat, simply because of a $10 million difference,
Yeah.
And if the Charlotte Hornets had paid the $110 million $110 million that Zoe was looking for, they would have been able to retain the services, and then it would probably have been me, Larry, and Zoe for the next 5 or 6 years. But instead, when Alonzo left, that led to me being traded to New Jersey and led to Larry Johnson being traded to New York. So that's the thing. You have to draft well, and you have to be able to retain the services of the guys who you draft.
And then Charlotte got traded to New Orleans. And all
Yeah.
that.
And then Charlotte went to New Orleans. So yeah.
So that sets up the natural question about Seattle. Since you're so actively involved in the Bulls telecasts and watch the NBA and talk to people on a daily basis, what do you think about this city, Seattle, getting a team back? It's been now we're talking about year 15, 2008, since the Sonics left Seattle.
Look, a lot of people will say I had my differences with George Karl, okay? But Seattle is one of the top 5 cities, in my opinion, in the NBA when they have a team. One of the top 5. I mean, all the times that, even when I wasn't a Sonic, when I came to play there, the fan support was there. The beautiful city was there. I mean, the environment was there. They deserve a team. I felt like even when you guys lost the Sonics, I felt as a former Sonic, I felt bad for the city. Because I knew how much the Sonics meant to the fans there. I knew how much they were ingrained in the culture there. So it was a sad day, but hopefully, I thought you guys were going to get the Sacramento Kings. I did. I was had my fingers crossed and everything, but unfortunately, it didn't happen. Hopefully, the NBA soon will put a franchise back there because it's just a great place to play, man. If I had been on better terms with Georgia, it had been a different coach there, I would have loved to have stayed there for the rest of my career.
Well, and you've had a chance too to see you played with Jamal, correct?
Jamal. Oh yeah, I did in Chicago, yes.
And what he's done here in Seattle in terms of growing the game and the summer pro-am, and Zach LaVine now is one of those guys who has come back and played, and you really could have an entire NBA roster made up of Seattle or Seattle area guys. I mean, what do you think that says about this marketplace? You're calling it top 5, you think, if a team ever comes back?
Oh, absolutely. You're forgetting Isaiah Thomas as well, as a Seattle guy. Because the Sonics, I believe, were so popular there, that inspires the younger talent to get to want to be a Sonic one day, or play in the league. And I think that's what you've seen in Zach LaVine. That's what you've seen in Jamal Crawford, Isaiah Thomas. Those guys aspired to play on that stage simply because that team was in that city, and the legacy of the Rain Man, legacy of the glove, those things live on. Those things don't ever die, and I understand Sean still lives in Seattle.
He does.
Yeah. So, one of the greatest Sonics of all time still lives in the city, and that's something to be said.
And if there's ever a team, you'll be back doing Bulls broadcasts, hopefully, with the Sonics in Seattle.
Yeah, I mean, hey, listen, if Seattle ever got a team, again, I would love to come out there and do broadcast. My wife, once the boys leave and go to college and everything, she wants to get out of here. So hey, and she's always talking about Seattle, so I'd love to come back.
Well, Kendall Gill, again, the resume that I don't have: NBA rookie, all first team, NBA steals leader in 99, most steals in one game, 11 in that 99 year, scored almost 13,000 points in the NBA. And of course, is an iconic Sonic. Thank you for spending all this time with us and for your honesty and good luck going forward.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
There you have it, another great edition of Iconic Sonics. Thanks to Chris Daniels for handling the hosting chores today, and thanks to Kendall Gill for spending time reminiscing on the 93-94 and 94-95 seasons here in Seattle with the Sonics. Thanks to all of our sponsors as well, and you can get more information about Iconic Sonics by visiting iconicsonics.com. See you next time.